Israel's army has officially admitted it has lost the war. That's what the latest admission from the official Israeli military spokesperson amounts to. Now, remember the big official military objectives set by Israel from the very start. Firstly, secure the release of hostages by military means. Well, Israel has killed far more Israeli hostages by military means than it's rescued by military means, with the vast majority of those who were freed were so because of prisoner exchanges and a ceasefire. Now, the other official military aim was the military defeat of Hamas. Now, 8.5 months later, yes, they've slaughtered tens of thousands of people. Yes, many of them children. Yes, they've wiped most of Gaza from the face of the earth. Yes, they've severely maimed and injured countless numbers. Yes, they've imposed mass starvation on the Palestinian people alongside the deprivation of the essentials of life. Yes, they brutally incarcerated and tortured so many. Yes, they violently crushed the medical system. Yes, we could go on. But they've done all of that, but they haven't defeated Hamas. Not even close. And they're never going to militarily defeat Hamas. Now, if you don't believe me, listen instead to Brigadier General Daniel Hagari, spokesperson for the so-called Israel Defense Forces, as he told Channel 430 News, one of Israel's main news stations, the following. The idea of destroying Hamas is simply throwing sand in the eyes of the public. Hamas is an idea. Hamas is a political party. It is rooted in the hearts of people. Whoever thinks we can eliminate Hamas is mistaken. Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood. It's been around for many, many years. Well, no shit, Einstein. Duh. This is something those of us who oppose this genocidal onslaught have been saying from the very start. Hamas emerged as a product of Palestinian suffering, of Palestinian misery, the product of languishing under a relentlessly brutal occupation of an Israeli state which violently prevents Palestinian national self-determination. Now, except that's not what Daniel Hagari was saying, but the point is, the absolute key point is, this is not some military force which you just pick off and that's the end of that one. It is rooted in Palestinian society. It is an idea which is where I think we would disagree, and it's not to support Hamas in any shape or form, is that it is a product of Palestinian suffering. And if you wish that to change, then you have to abolish Palestinian suffering. Now, as I've previously reported, US intelligence officials have privately been briefing that as well as the Israeli state killing fewer Hamas militants than claimed, Hamas's ranks are replenished by new militants because of one of the many consequences of engaging in mass slaughter is that many of the loved ones, the survivors of those butchered who've got nothing to lose, most of them don't even have homes to go back to, become determined to fight those who have drowned their people in so much blood for the rest of their lives, in many cases. Now, Hagari also says that it will be impossible to return all the Israeli hostages being held in Gaza through military operations, saying we have to reach a scenario where the hostages are returned in another manner. Again, it's just offensive, isn't it? It's just deeply, deeply offensive. All of the things that we've said from day one being just repeated back by those who have prosecuted a genocidal war, which has achieved none of its aims and has succeeded in slaughtering huge numbers of people and isolating Israel across the world and making it a state which Western public opinion has decisively turned against, which matters for Israel because who's it getting its weapons and diplomatic support from? Now, the last such hostage operation he was referring to there slaughtered perhaps up to 300 Palestinians, many of them children, as well as maiming many others, and meant the odds of a deal to release other hostages has massively gone down, meaning other hostages are more likely to end up killed, indeed potentially killed again by Israel's military onslaught. What needs to happen instead is a permanent ceasefire and a prisoner exchange, not least those Palestinian hostages, and let's call them that, who are being held by Israel, including children. Indeed, we've just had reports, for example, about Dr. Iyad Rantisi, the director of Kamal Adwan's hospital maternity department. He was killed, it transpires, in November last year after he was abducted by Israeli troops. And there are now demands to investigate the alleged torture that he suffered, in fact, being tortured to death. That's the second Palestinian doctor known to have been killed in Israeli custody. Well, before we continue, though, don't give this man, Daniel Hagari, any credit. He has been a propagandist for one of the great horrors of our age, and he should go to prison, along with the rest of Israel's establishment. He goes on to say, What can be done is to develop something else to replace Hamas, something that will make the population realise that something else is distributing the food, someone else is taking care of public services. To really weaken Hamas, this is the way. So what he's really zoning in on here is a split in the Israeli establishment, because Netanyahu is refusing a post-war plan, largely because he fears that when the war ends, he will be toppled from power and could end up going to prison, either in Israel or abroad. But this is, let's just put it kindly, desperately naive stuff, because he's suggesting the occupiers impose a new administration, either directly by the Israeli state or a collaborating administration, and that will offer an alternative to Hamas, and therefore Hamas's basis will disappear. Well, it just shows his education has only gone so far. That will be seen, such an administration, for what it is, a continued occupation by the Israeli state and a continued war on Palestinian national self-determination. It too will end up being fought by the Palestinian people in Gaza, whether through Hamas or through other factions that exist or new factions. It's just beyond delusional to suggest otherwise. And again, we were right all along about all of this. So I think maybe Daniel Hagari should listen to the people who were right from day one. So then Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu, whose arrest for war crimes and crimes against humanity is being sought by the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor, rebuffed the spokesperson here, declaring the political and security cabinet headed by Prime Minister Netanyahu defined as one of the goals of the war the destruction of Hamas's military and governmental capabilities. So Netanyahu's real clear position there is a war of annihilation, that you simply have to keep on waging war until the impossible military defeat of Hamas, which in practice means you just ethnically cleanse or murder every last Palestinian, which is why we have a genocide. Now let's just listen to this absolutely extraordinary attack by Netanyahu on President Joe Biden's US administration.
When Secretary Blinken was recently here in Israel, we had a candid conversation. I said I deeply appreciated the support the US has given Israel from the beginning of the war. But I also said something else. I said it's inconceivable that in the past few months, the administration has been withholding weapons and ammunition to Israel. Israel, America's closest ally, fighting for its life, fighting against Iran and our other common enemies. Secretary Blinken assured me that the administration is working day and night to remove these bottlenecks. I certainly hope that's the case. It should be the case. During World War II, Churchill told the United States, "Give us the tools, we'll do the job." And I say, give us the tools and we'll finish the job a lot faster.
Firstly, can I say this guy really does come across like Kevin Spacey's character in House of Cards, like such a transparently malevolent character. Do you know what I mean? It's just not that subtle. I mean, just look how he bites the hand that feeds him. The lack of gratitude. The US has poured weapons into Israel to facilitate its mass slaughter and destruction of Gaza and the mass huge war crimes and crimes against humanity involved. It's offered vast sums of aid, diplomatic, political support, and in fact, Biden, frankly, has suffered terrible political damage as a consequence and may well lose the presidency because of it all. And then Netanyahu comes out swinging like this. And then the Biden administration announces that it had cancelled a high-level meeting with Israel, adding the decision, but this is privately briefing, because they're not going to say it publicly, are they? No, instead they just do these little whisperings off stage, nods and winks at disillusioned voters. This decision makes it clear that there are such consequences for pulling such stunts. Ooh, a council meeting. Goodness me. So Israel can commit countless war crimes and crimes against humanity in plain sight, and frankly, as I think most of us would agree, a genocide. But then if Biden gets embarrassed by a video, then they declare, the US privately, wimps, there are consequences for pulling such stunts, which is, again, to emphasise a council meeting. I bet Netanyahu is trembling in his boots. And then the US Press Secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, says,
"We generally do not know what he's talking about. We just don't. A couple of things that I do want to add, and you're right, there was one particular shipment of munitions that was paused, and you've heard us talk about that many times. We continue to have these constructive discussions with Israelis for the release of that particular shipment that I just mentioned, and don't have any updates on that. There are no other pauses, no other pauses or holds in place. And so, as Secretary Blinken said today, he took some questions from some of your colleagues and spoke to the press. Obviously, everything else is moving in due process.
So the response is actually, no, we have been arming them to the teeth. No, seriously, we'd be giving loads of weapons as they prosecute their genocidal rampage. Well, I hope lawyers are noting all of this down. The fact is, Israel has committed some of the worst atrocities of the 21st century every day, for weeks, for months, in full public view, and with the direct complicity and involvement of the United States of America's administration and its European allies, including the British government. It has failed, catastrophically failed, in its stated war aims. And we said all this from the start. Everything we said was right. We don't say that out of any triumphalism. What vindication do we get? Just mass death. The point is that those who made themselves willing accomplices to this great crime of our age have to be held accountable. They can't be allowed to get away with it. Either the Israeli state or those who aided and abetted them. That's the point. This was a crime. A grave crime, which wasn't just on the Israeli state and isn't just on the Israeli state. It's on everybody who made it possible. Please like and subscribe. Do leave your comments. Love to hear your thoughts as ever. Help us take on the pro-war media as ever at patreon.com/OwenJones84. Listen to the podcast. I'll speak to you soon.